The transport ship broke through the atmosphere of the orbital station, and Taeyang pressed his face against the window. The Galactic Military Academy stretched before them, a massive structure that looked like a small city floating in space. He had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. Behind him, his 5 teammates were equally silent, taking in their first view of the place that would test everything they had learned. Taeyang was 23 years old, the oldest of the group and their squad leader. He had spent 4 years in Earth's military before being selected for this program. The others were younger, but each had been chosen for their unique skills. Hana sat beside him, her dark eyes tracking every detail of the station. She was their communications expert, but Taeyang knew she was much more than that. She could read people better than anyone he had ever met. Minho sat in the back, his large frame barely fitting in the standard seat. He was their engineer and heavy weapons specialist, a man who could fix anything or break it if needed. Jiwan was arguing with the ship's navigation system, complaining that it was too slow and inefficient. She was their pilot, and like most pilots, she thought she could do everything better. Doyen was reading a medical journal on his tablet, completely calm despite being in space for the first time. Their medical officer never seemed worried about anything. Yuna had her laptop out and was already trying to map the station's network systems before they even docked. The ship docked with a heavy clang that echoed through the hull. A voice came over the speaker in a language that sounded like singing, mixed with clicking sounds. A moment later, the translation came through.
Human cadets, welcome to the Galactic Military Academy.
Please proceed to Docking Bay 7 for orientation. They gathered their bags and walked down the ramp. The docking bay was enormous, filled with ships from dozens of different worlds. Taeyang had studied the major species in the United Galactic Coalition, but seeing them in person was different. A group of tall, thin beings with blue skin and 4 arms walked past, not even glancing at the humans. Another species that looked like walking crystals stood in formation near a different ship. They are staring at us, Hana whispered. She was right. Every species they passed stopped what they were doing to look at the human group. Some looked curious, others looked amused, and a few looked almost disgusted. Taeyang kept his face neutral and led his team toward the orientation area. The orientation hall was packed with cadets from across the galaxy. Taeyang counted at least 30 different species. The humans were directed to seats in the back, which gave them a good view of everyone else. A being that looked like a bear made of stone stood at the front. Its voice was deep and rumbling. I am Instructor Vorak. You are the finest military cadets from your respective worlds. You are here because your governments believe you have the potential to become leaders in the coalition forces. Vorak's eyes swept across the room. Most of you will fail. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vorak continued. This academy has trained warriors for 2,000 years. Our methods have been tested and refined across countless conflicts. You will learn discipline, strategy, and honor. You will learn what it means to serve something greater than yourself. Another instructor stepped forward, a sleek creature with silver skin and large black eyes. I am Instructor Thrix. In 3 days, you will begin the Endless War simulation. This is your final test before you're accepted as full cadets. Taeyang felt his team tense beside him. They had heard about the simulation during their briefings on Earth, but details were scarce. Thrix activated a holographic display. It showed a star system with 2 major planets locked in combat. Ships and stations dotted the space between them. This simulation recreates the Terracon conflict, a war that lasted 10 years and cost billions of lives. It is the most complex military scenario in known history. The hologram zoomed in to show battles on planets, in space, and across trade routes. It was chaos and order mixed together, a massive web of conflict that seemed to have no clear solution. You will be given command of a small neutral faction with limited resources, Thrix explained. Your goal is to end the war. Most cadet teams take 5 to 7 years of simulated time to achieve even a temporary ceasefire. The Academy record is 3 years set by a Valkyrian team 40 years ago. 7 years. Taeyang did the math quickly. With the time dilation technology, that would be about 2 months of real time inside the simulation, 2 months of feeling like you were actually at war. Some of you are wondering if the simulation can be won quickly, Vorak said, his stone-like face showing what might have been amusement. It cannot. The simulation is designed to test your patience, your ability to maintain strategy over long campaigns, and your willingness to make difficult choices over extended periods. There are no shortcuts in real warfare. After the orientation, the cadet teams were given time to explore the academy and meet each other. Taiyang and his team found themselves in one of the common areas, a large room with a viewing window that showed the planet below. A group of cadets approached them. The leader was tall and covered in silver scales, with eyes that had no pupils. "You are the humans, yes?" His voice was smooth and pleasant. "We are," Taiyang replied. "I am Rexir of the Valkyrian Dominion. We are curious about your species. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. We have studied only 3 other worlds with such a high danger rating." Rexir tilted his head. "How does your species survive in such conditions?" "We adapt," Hana said simply. Another cadet, this one looking like a mass of tentacles barely held together in a containment suit, spoke through a translator. "The Quilnari Hive offers sympathy to the human collective. You face the simulation with severe disadvantages. Your species has only been spacefaring for 200 years. You have no experience with prolonged interstellar conflict. We appreciate your concern," Taiyang said, keeping his voice polite. A third cadet, a muscular being with red skin and horns, laughed loudly. "The Krethic do not offer sympathy. We offer a wager. The humans will fail within the first simulated month. They will panic when they realize the scope of the challenge." Minho started to stand up, but Taiyang put a hand on his shoulder. "We will see," Taiyang said calmly. The other cadets left, still talking among themselves about the primitive humans and their certain failure. Once they were gone, Yuna looked up from her laptop. "I do not like them. They think we are stupid," Jiwon said. "They think because Earth is young in space that we know nothing." "Let them think that," Taiyang said. He looked at his team, these 5 people he had trained with for a year. "We have 3 days before the simulation. I want us to use every minute. Yuna, get me everything you can find about the Terracon conflict, not just the official Academy version. I want real historical data. Hana, study the species involved in that war. I need to understand how they think." Minho, analyze the weapons and technology from that period. Jiwon, map out the star system and its strategic points. Toyun, look into the biology of both sides, anything that might be relevant. "What will you do?" Hana asked. "I am going to figure out why this war lasted 10 years, Taeyang said. "Because that is the real question. Not how to win it, but why it did not end sooner." The team split up, each heading to different parts of the Academy's vast library and database systems. As Taeyang walked through the corridors, he noticed other cadets still staring at the humans. Some looked amused, others looked pitiful. One instructor, a being made of what looked like living metal, actually shook its head sadly as Taeyang passed. They all thought the humans would fail. They thought Earth's young species could not possibly compete with civilizations that had been fighting wars in space for thousands of years. Taeyang smiled to himself. They had no idea what was coming. Humans had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. They had turned their entire planet into a classroom for conflict, survival, and adaptation. These other species had been practicing war in controlled environments with rules and honor. Humans had learned war on a world that tried to kill them every single day. There was a difference between studying violence and living with it. Taeyang found an empty study room and began pulling up files on the Terracon conflict. He had 3 days to understand a war that lasted a decade. For most species, that would be impossible. But Taeyang was not like most species. He was human, and humans had gotten very good at solving impossible problems. Yuna had not slept in 2 days. Her eyes were red and her hands shook slightly as she typed, but she had found something important. She ran through the academy corridors at 3 a.m, not caring that she was breaking quiet hours. She burst into the study room where Taeyang was still reading reports. "It is not a test," she said, breathing hard. "It is the actual war." Taeyang looked up from his screen. "Explain." Yuna pulled up her laptop and showed him dozens of files. "I hacked into the academy archives. Not the student files, the real archives. The simulation is not based on the Terracon conflict. It is the Terracon conflict. Every ship, every soldier, every resource count, every decision point. They recorded everything during the real war and turned it into a simulation with perfect historical accuracy." Taeyang leaned forward. "Why would they do that?" "Because they want us to learn from what actually happened. They want us to face the exact same problems that real commanders faced. Every strategy that failed in the real war will fail in the simulation. Every mistake that was made before will happen again if we make the same choices. But that means, Taiyang said slowly, the war already has an answer. Someone won, someone lost. The outcome is already written in history. Exactly, Yuna said. They are not asking us to fight a war. They are asking us to solve a puzzle that already has a solution. Taiyang stood up quickly. Get the others now. 20 minutes later, all 6 humans were crammed into the study room. They looked tired but alert. Taiyang explained what Yuna had discovered. So we are supposed to replay history? Minho asked. That seems like a strange test. No, Hana said quietly. They want us to learn from history, to make better choices than the real commanders made, to find ways to end the war faster. But they said no one has ever done it in less than 3 years of simulated time, Jiwan pointed out. The war lasted 10 years in reality. Even the best teams only managed to get it down to 3 years. That means even knowing what happened, cadets still cannot find a fast solution. Because they are fighting the war the same way it was fought before, Taiyang said. They are using military strategy. They are trying to win battles and capture territory. They are playing by the rules of traditional warfare. Doyen looked up from the medical files he had been reading. I found something strange. The 2 species in this war, the Tarics and the Onari, they cannot live on each other's planets. The Tarics need high gravity and low oxygen. The Onari need low gravity and high methane content. They are biologically incompatible. So why were they fighting over territory? Minho asked. Resources, Yuna said, pulling up economic data. The contested zone had rare minerals that both species needed for their technology. But here is the interesting part. The cost of the war was enormous. Both sides spent more money fighting than the resources were worth. After 2 years, the war was already a net loss for both sides economically. Then why did it continue for 8 more years? Jiwan asked. Pride, Hana said. Fear of looking weak. Political pressure. The same reasons wars continue on Earth even when they stop making sense. Taiyang walked to the window and looked out at the stars. His team waited silently. They had learned to give him space when he was thinking. After a long minute, he turned back to them. They want us to fight this war using their rules. They expect us to build alliances, manage supply lines, win battles, and slowly push toward a peace treaty. That is how they think. That is how their species would handle it. But we are not them, Minho said. No, Taiyang agreed. We are from Earth. We learned warfare from a planet that has been at war with itself and with nature for all of human history. We learned that the best war is the one that never happens, and the second best war is the one that ends before it really starts. You want to stop them from fighting? Hana said. It was not a question. I want to make the war pointless, Taiyang said. They are fighting over resources. What if those resources suddenly become worthless? They are fighting because both sides think they can win. What if we make it impossible for either side to win? They are fighting because they hate each other. What if we give them something they hate more? Oh, you want to cheat? Jiwan said with a grin. I want to think differently, Taiyang corrected. The simulation is designed to test traditional military thinking over long campaigns. But humans do not do well with long campaigns. We do well with crisis response. We do well with adapting to new situations. We do well with breaking rules. Over the next day, the team built a plan that would have horrified any proper military instructor. They were not planning battles. They were planning chaos. Yuna would hack into both sides' communication networks. Not to steal secrets, but to plant false information. She would make both sides think their supply situations were worse than they actually were. She would corrupt logistics data just enough to cause confusion without being detected. Hana would start rumors. She had studied both species and understood how they communicated, how they spread information, and what they feared most. She would use that knowledge to plant ideas in their populations. Ideas about secret weapons. Ideas about their leaders lying to them. Ideas about the war being a mistake. Minho would destroy infrastructure but not military targets. He would hit the economic foundations of the war. The mining facilities that were barely profitable. The trade stations that made continuing the war economically possible. He would make the war too expensive to continue. Jiwan would fly aggressive patrols with a single ship, but make it look like an entire fleet through clever use of sensor tricks and false signatures. She would create the impression that the humans had massive military power, making both sides nervous about a third faction entering the conflict. Doyen would release a biological agent, not a weapon, not something lethal, but a pathogen that caused temporary confusion and disorientation. Both sides would panic, thinking the other had developed bioweapons. They would waste resources on protection and revenge plans for an attack that never really happened. And Taeyang would talk. He would open diplomatic channels with every minor faction, every planet that was tired of the war, every group that had been ignored by the major powers. He would build a coalition of the unwanted and give them a voice. "This is insane," Minho said when they had finished planning. "If this were a real war, we would be tried for war crimes." "It is not a real war," Taeyang said. "It is a simulation. And we are not trying to win by their rules. We are trying to end it by ours." On the third day, all the cadet teams were brought to the simulation center. It was a massive room filled with pods that looked like coffins made of glass and metal. Each team would enter their pod and be connected to the simulation through neural interfaces. Inside, time would pass differently. Hours in the real world would feel like days or weeks in the simulation. The other cadet teams looked confident. The Valkyrian team moved with precise, practiced coordination. The Quilnari hive mind operated as one perfect unit. The Krethic warriors beat their chests and roared challenges at each other. The humans stood quietly in their plain uniforms, looking small and insignificant compared to the other species. Instructor Vorak stood before them all. "You will enter the simulation and be given command of a small neutral faction. You will have limited resources, limited ships, and limited influence. The war has been raging for 3 years already when you arrive. Both sides are entrenched. Your task is to end it." "Remember," Instructor Thrix added, "this simulation has been completed by thousands of cadets over centuries. We have seen every strategy, every trick, every clever plan. The simulation adapts and responds realistically. Do not expect to find easy solutions." The teams entered their pods. Taeyang lay down on the cold metal surface and felt the neural connectors attached to his head. The last thing he saw was the pod's lid closing above him. Then there was darkness. When the simulation began, Taeyang found himself standing on the bridge of a small ship. His team was around him, looking just as real as they had in the real world. Through the view screen, he could see a war-torn section of space. Destroyed ships floated among the stars. In the distance, 2 fleets were engaged in combat. "Status report," Taeyang said. Yuna checked her console. "We have 3 ships, minimal weapons. Enough resources for maybe 2 months of operations. Our faction has a small station and a few diplomatic contacts. That is it. Both sides have been asked for peace talks 17 times, Hana reported. All requests were rejected. Time to change the game, Taeyang said. Execute the plan. All of you at once. Give them chaos. His team moved quickly, each starting their assigned tasks. Taeyang opened a communication channel to a minor faction that had lost 3 colonies in the war. "This is Taeyang of the Human Coalition. We want to talk about ending this war. Are you interested?" The response came back quickly. "Everyone wants to end the war. No one knows how." "We do," Taeyang said. "And we are going to show you." Outside the simulation, in the monitoring room, instructors and other cadets watched the displays showing each team's progress. The Valkyrian team was carefully building alliances. The Quilnari were coordinating a complex trade network. The Krethic were planning a major military offensive. The human display showed something different. It showed 6 people moving in 6 different directions, doing 6 things that seemed... Yuna's fingers flew across her console as the simulation timer showed 15 minutes had passed. She had already broken into both sides' communication networks 3 times. She was not looking for secret battle plans or hidden weapons. She was looking for something much more simple and much more dangerous: supply chain data. She found the logistics network for the Terek fleet and smiled. It was well protected but organized in a way that reminded her of old Earth systems. She did not need to shut anything down. She just needed to change a few numbers. A supply shipment that was supposed to arrive at Station 7 got rerouted in the system to Station 12. Not canceled, just moved. The physical supplies would still exist, but the records would not match reality. She did the same thing to the Onari network. Changed delivery schedules by a few days, altered inventory counts by small amounts, made it look like certain critical supplies were running low when they were actually fine. Nothing big enough to trigger alarms, just enough to make everyone nervous. In the monitoring room outside the simulation, a junior instructor pointed at the human display. "They are hacking both sides. Should we stop them?" Instructor Thrick studied the screen carefully. Hacking is allowed in warfare. Let them continue. But they are not stealing intelligence. They are just corrupting data. What is the point? Thrix did not answer because he was not sure himself. Inside the simulation, Hana was doing something even stranger. She was not sending official diplomatic messages. She was using back channels, the informal networks that existed between civilian populations. She had studied how both species communicated and learned that they both had something similar to Earth's internet, places where people talked without official oversight. She began planting rumors. Small ones at first. A post suggesting that the Terek military was developing a weapon that could destroy entire planets. Another post claiming that Onari scientists had created a virus that could kill anyone in seconds. She made the posts look like they came from concerned citizens, from people who had family in the military, from anonymous whistleblowers. She knew how fear worked. She had studied Earth's history, how rumors and panic could spread faster than facts. These species were not so different. They would see these posts and feel afraid. They would share them with friends. Some would demand answers from their governments. The governments would deny everything, but that would only make people more suspicious. At 20 minutes into the simulation, Minho launched his attack. But it was not the attack anyone expected. He did not target military ships or weapons platforms. He looked at Yuna's economic data and identified 3 facilities that were supposedly profitable mining operations in the contested zone. These 3 stations, he told Taeyang over the comm, they are the only reason the war still makes economic sense. They are barely profitable, but both sides think they are worth fighting for. Destroy them, Taeyang said simply. Minho took one of their small ships and flew into the contested zone. He avoided all military vessels, moving carefully through the chaos of the war. When he reached the first mining station, he planted charges on its main power core and left. He did the same to the other 2 stations. When all 3 exploded within minutes of each other, both sides thought it was an attack by the other. Military forces scrambled to protect the remaining stations, but Minho had chosen carefully. Those 3 stations were the key ones. Without them, the entire economic model of the war collapsed. Both sides were now fighting over resources that would cost more to extract than they were worth. Jiwan was having the time of her life. She was flying their fastest ship through the neutral zones, pushing the engines harder than they were designed to go, but she was not attacking anything. She was appearing on sensors, then disappearing, then appearing somewhere else. She was using every trick she knew to make one ship look like dozens. She would drop fake sensor buoys that mimicked ship signatures. She would use the ship's emergency beacon in short bursts that looked like fleet communications. She would fire the engines at maximum power in ways that created heat signatures similar to much larger vessels. Both sides started getting reports of a massive fleet movement in neutral space, a third faction with serious military power. The reports were confusing and contradictory, but that made them more frightening. An unknown threat was always scarier than a known enemy. At 25 minutes, Doyen did something that horrified the instructors watching from outside the simulation. He released a pathogen into several contested zones. The instructors immediately checked the simulation's biological warfare protocols, ready to shut down the entire exercise. But then they looked closer. The pathogen was not lethal. It was not even particularly harmful. It caused temporary dizziness and mild disorientation for about 6 hours, then disappeared completely from the body. It was less dangerous than a common cold, but Doyen had designed it to be scary. It had symptoms that appeared quickly and dramatically. Affected people would suddenly feel confused and dizzy. They would have trouble focusing. Then just as quickly they would recover. Both militaries had protocols for biological attacks. When soldiers started reporting these symptoms, panic spread instantly. Both sides activated their biowarfare response teams. They diverted resources to developing countermeasures for a weapon that was barely more than an inconvenience. They accused each other of crossing a terrible line. They threatened massive retaliation. All of this happened in the first 30 minutes of the simulation. Taeyang coordinated everything from his command ship while simultaneously opening diplomatic channels with every minor faction he could find. There were dozens of them. Small colonies, independent stations, trade guilds, religious groups, everyone who had been hurt by the war but was too small to matter to the major powers. We are organizing a coalition, he told them. A group of neutral parties who want the war to end. We have no agenda except peace. Will you join us? Most said yes immediately. They were desperate for the fighting to stop. They had lost homes, families, and futures to a war they had no part in starting. Taeyang gave them a voice. He created communication channels where they could coordinate. He made them feel like they mattered. At 30 minutes, the situation in the simulation had changed completely. Both major factions were experiencing supply problems they did not understand. Their populations were frightened by rumors of superweapons. Their economies were collapsing as the key mining stations burned. They thought a powerful third faction had entered the war. They believed the enemy had used biological weapons. And they were facing a growing coalition of neutral parties demanding peace. None of this was what the simulation was designed to test. Cadet teams were supposed to spend weeks building careful alliances, managing resources, and planning military campaigns. The humans had spent 30 minutes creating chaos. In the monitoring room, the junior instructors were arguing about whether to stop the simulation. "This is not how it is supposed to work," one of them insisted. "They are not following proper military doctrine." Instructor Vorak watched the displays with a mixture of confusion and fascination. "What doctrine are they following?" "I think," Instructor Thrick said slowly, "they are not following any doctrine at all. They are making this up as they go. But that is impossible. You cannot win a war by improvising." "They are not trying to win the war," Thrix realized. "Look at their actions. They have not won a single battle. They have not captured any territory. They have not built any significant military force. But both sides are falling apart." Another instructor, a being that looked like it was made of light, spoke up. "They are attacking the war itself. Not the enemy, the war." On the main display, they could see the other cadet teams making steady, logical progress. The Valkyrians had secured several alliances and were building up their resource base. The Quilnari had established profitable trade routes. The Krethic had won 3 minor battles. Everyone was playing the game the way it was supposed to be played. The humans were playing a completely different game. At 40 minutes, both major factions were demanding emergency sessions of their government councils. Military leaders were being questioned about the supply problems, the mysterious third faction, and the biological weapons. Economic advisors were presenting data showing that continuing the war was financial suicide. Intelligence agencies were trying to figure out who was behind all the chaos. Taeyang watched it all from his command screen and allowed himself a small smile. "Hana, how are the populations responding?" "Panic mixed with anger," she reported. "The Terriks are demanding their government explain the superweapon rumors. The Onari are protesting in the streets about the biological attack. Both sides have large groups calling for immediate peace talks. Yuna, supply situation? Both militaries are experiencing shortages. Nothing critical yet, but enough to make commanders nervous. They are starting to question whether they can sustain a long campaign. Minho, economic impact. The mining stations are completely destroyed. Early estimates from both sides show that continuing the war will now cost them more than they can ever gain back. Some of their economists are already calling it a lost cause. Jiwan, how big do they think we are?" At 45 minutes into the simulation, both the Tarik and Onari governments were on the edge of collapse. Their militaries were confused, their economies were failing, and their populations were demanding answers. But Taeyang knew that desperate governments could make dangerous choices. Cornered animals always fought hardest. "Yuna, show me the government structures," he said. She pulled up detailed charts showing how both species made decisions. The Terriks had a council of military leaders and corporate executives. The Onari had a parliament with representatives from different colonies. Both systems had hardliners who wanted to continue the war and moderates who were looking for a way out. "The problem is the hardliners have too much power," Yuna explained. "They are the ones who started this war. If they admit it was a mistake, they lose everything. They would rather burn their entire civilization down than admit they were wrong. Then we help the moderates take control," Taeyang said. He turned to Hana. "Can you do that?" Hana studied the data carefully. "Yes, but it will not be pretty. The moderates need proof that the hardliners have been lying to them. They need something big enough to justify removing the war leaders from power. Give me options. I can fake documents showing the hardliners knew about the economic problems from the start. Make it look like they hid data from their own governments. I can create communication records that never existed, showing them discussing how to extend the war for personal profit." Hana paused. "But this is massive fraud. If this were real, it would be incredibly wrong. It is not real, Taeyang reminded her. And we are not trying to hurt anyone. We are trying to stop a war that is already hurting billions. Hana nodded and got to work. Using the access Yuna had gained to both networks, she began creating a false history. Documents that showed the Terek Military Council had known the war was unwinnable after 2 years, but continued anyway to maintain their power. Records suggesting that Onari parliament leaders had fabricated intelligence about enemy threats to justify continued fighting. She made the forgeries good, but not perfect. She wanted them to be discovered. Within minutes, junior officials on both sides began finding the documents. Some sent them up through official channels. Others leaked them to news networks. The information spread like fire. At 50 minutes, massive protests erupted on both sides. The Terek population demanded the military council step down. The Onari colonies called for emergency elections. The moderates, who had been quietly arguing for peace for years, suddenly had the evidence they needed to challenge the war leadership. But Taeyang knew that desperate leaders could still cause terrible damage. Hardliners on both sides were calling for one final massive attack, a last chance to win the war before they lost power. The simulation showed fleets mobilizing for what would be the largest battle yet. Minho, Taeyang said urgently, can you stop those fleets without killing anyone? Minho studied the tactical display. Maybe. If I target their fuel storage facilities instead of their ships, they would be stranded, unable to move but alive. Do it fast. Minho took their small attack ship and pushed it to maximum speed. He flew straight through both military formations, too fast for their weapons to track. He launched precise missiles at fuel depots, supply ships, and refueling stations. Within minutes, both fleets were experiencing critical fuel shortages. Ships that had been moving toward battle positions suddenly had to conserve power, just to keep life support running. The great final battle never happened. Both fleets floated helplessly in space, unable to attack each other even if they wanted to. At 52 minutes, Taeyang made his move. He opened a public broadcast on all frequencies, making sure every government, every military, and every civilian could hear him. This is Taeyang of the Human Coalition. We are a neutral party. We have no stake in your war, but we have been watching and we have learned something important. He paused to let the translation software catch up in both languages. You are not fighting each other anymore. You are fighting the idea of war itself. You cannot stop because stopping would mean admitting you were wrong, but we have evidence that your leaders knew the war was wrong years ago and continued anyway for their own benefit. He nodded to Hana, who released the forged documents publicly. Every screen in both civilizations suddenly had access to the damning records. Your leaders lied to you, Taeyang continued. But you do not have to keep dying for their lies. The Human Coalition offers mediation. We have no interest in who wins. We only care about ending the suffering. Both sides can save face. Both sides can claim victory. But only if you stop now. There was silence across the simulation. Then slowly, responses began coming in. The moderate factions on both sides were reaching out, asking for details. The hardliners were screaming that it was all a trick, but their voices were drowned out by the masses of people who just wanted the war to end. Jiwan was monitoring military communications. Their fleets are not moving against each other. Some ships are actually turning away. Commanders are refusing orders to attack. The populations are marching on government buildings, Hana reported. Both sides. They are demanding immediate peace talks. At 55 minutes, representatives from both moderate factions agreed to meet with human mediation. Taeyang arranged a neutral location, a small station that both sides could reach safely. The negotiations happened faster than anyone thought possible. Taeyang had prepared carefully, studying both species and understanding what they needed to hear. You cannot live on each other's planets, he told them. You are fighting for territory you cannot even use. The resources you are fighting over cost more to extract than they are worth. The war has already cost both of you decades of development and billions of lives. There is no victory here. There is only less loss. But we cannot simply surrender, the Terek representative said. Our people would never accept it. Then do not surrender, Taeyang said. Both of you declare victory at the same time. Sign a treaty that gives each side something they can show their people. The Tereks get exclusive rights to high-gravity mining. The Onari get exclusive rights to low-gravity agriculture. You divide the contested zone based on environmental compatibility, not conquest. What about the resources we were fighting for? The Onari representative asked. They are gone. Yuna said bluntly, showing them data on the destroyed mining stations. That war is over. Now you can either keep fighting over ashes or you can build something new. But the economic damage, the Terek representative protested. Both our civilizations are on the edge of collapse. Then work together, Taiyang said. He activated a display showing economic projections that Yuna had prepared. Look at this. If you establish trade between your species, the profits would be enormous. The Tereks have manufacturing capabilities the Onari need. The Onari have agricultural techniques the Tereks need. You can rebuild together faster than either of you could alone. But we hate each other, both representatives said at the same time, then looked surprised that they had said the same thing. You hate each other because you have been at war. Hana said gently. War creates hate. But peace can create something different. Maybe not friendship, but mutual benefit is enough to start. Doyen stepped forward with medical data. We have analyzed the biological incident that occurred. It was not a weapon. It was a mild pathogen that is already gone from your systems. Neither side attacked the other with bioweapons. You were frightened over nothing. Then who released it? The Onari representative demanded. Does it matter? Taeyang asked. What matters is that both of you were ready to believe the worst of each other. That is what war does. It makes enemies out of people who could have been partners. At 57 minutes, both representatives agreed to a ceasefire. They agreed to begin formal peace negotiations. They agreed to establish trade relations. They agreed to divide the contested zone based on environmental compatibility rather than military conquest. Minho provided defensive technology that made future wars between them nearly impossible. Energy shields that could protect against each other's weapons, but that required cooperation to manufacture. Both sides would need to work together to maintain their defenses, creating economic interdependence. The treaty was signed at 58 minutes and 13 seconds. The simulation registered a complete ceasefire. Both civilizations were stable and beginning economic cooperation. The war was over. In the monitoring room, absolute silence reigned. Every instructor, every cadet, every observer stared at the displays in disbelief. The timer showed 58 minutes and 13 seconds of simulated time. The Valkyrian team was still in their simulation, carefully building alliances. They had made excellent progress and would probably finish in around 4 years of simulated time, which would be very good. The Quilnari were in the middle of establishing complex trade networks. They were on track for a 5-year solution. The Krethik were planning a major offensive that would probably set them back several months but fit their honor-based culture. The humans had finished in under an hour. That is impossible, one instructor said. The simulation does not allow that. Instructor Vorak checked the simulation's core programming. It is not. The silence in the simulation center was so complete that Taiyang could hear his own heartbeat. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species stared at the 6 humans who had just stepped out of their pod. No one spoke. No one moved. Finally, Instructor Vorak found his voice. How long did it take you? 58 minutes and 13 seconds of simulated time, Taeyang replied. Was that not fast enough? We can try again if we did something wrong. Fast enough? A junior instructor's voice cracked. The academy record is 3 years. You finished in less than an hour. The war only needed an hour, Yuna said simply. Once we understood the real problems, the solutions were obvious. Instructor Thrick stepped forward, his silver skin reflecting the harsh lights. Explain. Explain everything you did and why. The 6 humans looked at each other. Taeyang nodded and they began describing their approach. As they talked, more instructors gathered around, listening with growing disbelief. We started by asking why the war lasted 10 years in reality, Taeyang explained. That seemed like the important question. Not how to win, but why it did not end sooner. The answer was simple, Hana continued. Both sides were trapped. They had invested so much in the war that admitting it was a mistake would destroy their leadership. The war continued because stopping would mean accepting blame. So we removed the option to continue, Minho said. We destroyed the economic foundations. We made continuing the war impossible. But you did not fight, Vorak protested. You did not capture territory or win battles. Why would we? Jiwon asked. Winning battles just creates more enemies. Every victory for one side makes the other side more determined to keep fighting. Earth learned that lesson the hard way many times. You manipulated both sides, another instructor said. You spread false information, forged documents, created panic. In real warfare, that would be considered deeply dishonorable. This is not real warfare, Doyen said calmly. This is a simulation designed to test our thinking. We thought differently than you expected. But you lied, the instructor insisted. We did, Taeyang agreed. And those lies saved billions of simulated lives. The real war killed countless people over 10 years. Our lies ended the war in less than an hour with almost no casualties. Which is more honorable? The question hung in the air. Many of the alien instructors looked uncomfortable. Their cultures valued honor, direct combat, and fair fighting. The human approach felt wrong to them, even though they could not explain why. A new voice spoke up. It was Rexir, the Valkyrian cadet who had spoken to the humans on their first day. He had just emerged from his own simulation pod, where he had been fighting for what felt like 2 months. They won because they did not play the game. They changed it. They cheated, another cadet shouted angrily. Show me the rule they broke, Instructor Thrick said quietly. The simulation allows hacking, deception, sabotage, and psychological warfare. All of these are recognized military tactics. The humans simply use them more aggressively than anyone thought possible. We need to review their simulation data, Vorak said. Every action, every decision. We need to verify that the simulation responded correctly. The review took 3 hours. Technicians analyzed every moment of the human simulation, checking that all responses were within normal parameters. Instructors debated whether certain actions should have been allowed. Some called for the result to be thrown out. But Instructor Thrix defended the humans. They found a solution we did not anticipate. That is not cheating. That is exactly what we should want from military leaders. The ability to think beyond established doctrine. Finally, the Academy's senior council made their decision. The 6 humans were brought before them in a formal chamber filled with beings who had trained warriors for centuries. The council leader, an ancient being that looked like it was made of crystal, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The human cadets completed the endless war simulation in 58 minutes and 13 seconds of simulated time. This result has been verified and found to be legitimate. The simulation responded appropriately to all their actions. Taeyang felt Hana tense beside him. They had been waiting for this moment, unsure whether they would be praised or punished. However, the council leader continued. The methods used were highly unconventional and to many of us uncomfortable. The human cadets are requested to explain their thinking to this council. Taeyang stepped forward. We come from Earth. It is classified as a Class 12 death world. Do you know what that means? It means your planet is extremely dangerous, Vorak said. It means our planet has been trying to kill us since before we had language, Taeyang said. Hurricanes that destroy cities. Earthquakes that swallow towns. Diseases that wipe out populations. Predators that hunt us. We have faced extinction more times than we can count. And that is not even including the wars we fight against each other. What does this have to do with the simulation? The council leader asked. Everything, Hana said, stepping forward. You species evolved on peaceful worlds. Your wars are controlled. You have rules and honor and time to think carefully about your strategies. That is not how humans learned warfare. We learned to survive crisis after crisis after crisis, Ji-Wan added. We learned to adapt fast or die. We learned that the best fight is the one you avoid completely. We studied your simulation and saw that everyone approaches it the same way. Yuna explained. You build up forces slowly. You fight careful battles. You manage resources over long campaigns. That is how your species think because that is what your worlds taught you. Earth taught us differently, Minho said. Earth taught us that when you have a problem, you solve it as fast as possible before it kills you. You do not fight fair. You do not worry about honor. You survive. But war is not the same as natural disasters, an instructor argued. To us it is, Taeyang said. War is just another problem to solve. Another threat to end as quickly as possible. You saw a war simulation. We saw a crisis that needed to be resolved before it caused more damage. Doyen spoke quietly. You want to know why we manipulated both sides, why we lied and deceived? Because on Earth we learned that sometimes the only way to save people is to make them stop fighting. We learned that pride kills, that honor can be a trap, that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that feels wrong. The council chamber was silent again. The council members looked at each other, communicating in ways the humans could not follow. Finally, the Crystal Council leader spoke again. The human approach challenges everything we teach at this academy. It goes against centuries of military tradition. Many of our instructors believe it should not be allowed. Taeyang's heart sank. They were going to be disqualified. However, the council leader continued, Instructor Thrix has convinced us that this is precisely why we should accept the result. Military doctrine exists to guide us, not to limit us. The humans found a solution we never considered because they think in ways we do not. That is valuable. The human cadets are officially recognized as having completed the endless war simulation in record time. The simulation will be redesigned to account for their methods, ensuring future cadets cannot simply copy their approach. But their achievement stands. Relief flooded through Taeyang. They had done it. They had won. However, the council leader said, and Taeyang tensed again, you will be required to teach a course explaining your methods to all cadets. The galaxy needs to understand how Deathworlders think. It may be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Over the following weeks, the 6 humans became strange celebrities at the academy. Other species watched them with a mixture of respect, fear, and confusion. Some wanted to learn from them. Others avoided them entirely. The course they taught was unlike anything the academy had ever offered. They called it crisis warfare, the Death World approach. They taught hundreds of cadets from dozens of species how to think like humans, how to identify the foundations of a conflict, how to make continuing a war more costly than ending it, how to use psychology, economics, and deception alongside traditional military force. Some cadets embraced the teachings eagerly. Others struggled with concepts that went against everything their cultures valued. A few refused to attend at all, saying human methods were dishonorable, but slowly understanding began to spread. The galaxy started to realize that humanity's strength was not in their muscles or their weapons. It was in their minds. Minds shaped by a world that never gave them time to fight fair, that never cared about honor, that only rewarded survival. One day, Instructor Thrix found Taeyang sitting alone in an observation room, looking out at the stars. Do you regret how you won? Taeyang considered the question carefully. We did not win. We ended a simulation. In the real war, billions died over 10 years. If our methods had been available then, maybe those people would have lived. No, I do not regret it. Many species find your approach disturbing, Thrix said. I know. They think we are brutal and ruthless, and are they wrong? Maybe not, Taeyang admitted. Earth made us this way. We learn to do whatever it takes to survive. That includes things that are not pretty or honorable. But we are still here. Still alive. Still trying to do better. That is what frightens them, Thrix said. Not that you can fight,